It's good.
Okay, yeah, thank you everybody for being here. Today is Tuesday, September 19th, 2023. My name is Mike Wickers, mayor of our beautiful city of Cottonwood Heights, and this is the Cottonwood Heights City Council work session. We'll start our business today with a review of our business meeting agenda for tonight. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Like always, we have our city council committee reports, and we'll have a citizen comment period. We do have a public hearing this evening, which is our proposed budget amendment for our fiscal year 2023-2024. We're going to discuss this in detail in a staff report, so I won't get into it right here. And this is just a public hearing. There's no vote. The vote will occur if we don't go forward following in our next meeting. We have two staff reports for this evening, which will be our Public Works Department. Hopefully Matt's spent a lot of time.
Coming in strong.
All
Yeah,
right, I
got
expected
this.
nothing less, Matt,
Who
so
am I up against though?
you were up against President Joe Biden.
Never mind. You set me up.
The next report will be our Unified Fire Authority report. And then in place of Chief Pilgrim, we will have our Battalion Chief Brad Lynn presenting to us. So we'll be excited to hear from Chief Lynn. And then we have 2 legislative items to consider for the council tonight. Item 7.1 has been in the works for a long time. So we're excited to get it to this point, but this is consideration of ordinance 403. Amending code chapter 19.72, the sensitive lands evaluation and development standards ordinance. So actually I'll have our administrator or our community and economic development director, Mike Johnson, actually why don't you discuss that just for a little bit here, Mike, if you would.
Yeah, sure. Just updates from last time, probably in the last week, we've made a few, I call them very minor changes, but changes that were expressed by residents and some of the public comments we've gotten, just to make the ordinance read a little smoother, to clarify the requirement of taking minutes for DRC meetings. That was one that was touched on. And then a few minor edits to the riparian protection section, referencing additional regulatory agencies that were pointed out as not being included by residents that we've been working with. There was a restriction. I'm trying to think of the big ones. There was a restriction for composting areas, and the point was made, hey, sometimes people mow their leaves and leave that, and natural composting can actually be an okay thing to have in these areas. So we've included an allowance for that. Natural leaf compost of a certain size is allowed. It'd be the animal waste and things like that wouldn't be allowed. And just a bunch more just massaging and kind of back and forth with resident groups to address what I would consider last minute minor concerns. The only questions that I think kind of remained regarded non-conforming structures. And I think the council all got a summary sheet yesterday that had a question that addresses this, but basically, hey, am I allowed to rebuild my home if I live in one of these areas? And the answer is yes, and it just kind of depends. The process depends on the exact situation. And I think just for the record, I'll summarize it quick here, and then if there's questions in the business meeting, I can answer them in more detail. But if a house exists right now closer than 20 feet from the top of bank areas, with this ordinance, that would be considered a legal but non-conforming structure. And it already would be per Salt Lake County flood control standards because their setback requirement is 20 feet as well. And just to reiterate, for residential areas, we have matched the setback requirements of Salt Lake County flood control that have been in place for probably since before Cottonwood Heights was a city. If a home is existing within 20 feet of the top of the bank area, and that home wants to rebuild or expand or build an addition, or do something like that, there's a process to do that, and it's the same process that every property in the city that would be considered legal non-conforming has to go through. It goes through our appeals hearing officer, and because we have a lot of houses that were built in different eras under different regulations, we see this quite a bit when someone wants to reinvest in their property. And maybe they don't have a setback that meets today's standard. They can still build to that standard if they come through this process. The only thing we ask is they don't get more non-conforming than they are today. So if you have a setback that's closer than what we would allow, just don't make it even closer to the property line. Keep it the same or better. This is the same logic for expansions in these riparian areas. If you're within 20 feet already, we just ask you don't get closer than 20 feet. You go through that same process, you get approval, and then you.
So it's a full tear down and they're within 5 feet.
Yeah.
They do a full tear down.
Yeah.
Go through this process. And
Now,
they would likely be approved to go to that spot.
a full tear down is a little bit different.
Okay.
Typically, if a home is destroyed involuntarily by natural hazard, fire, wind, damaged, it's allowed to be rebuilt. You don't have to even go through that extra process if it's involuntarily destroyed. If it's voluntarily torn down to redevelop, and this applies everywhere we have non-conforming structures, when you rebuild, you do have to meet current code. That's the same logic of if you demolish your home that was built in the 60s and it had, compliant at the time, window wells and things like that. If you rebuild that voluntarily, you have to bring all that stuff up to today's standard. So if it's a voluntary, complete rebuild, you can apply for that process still. But typically you have to rebuild under today's ordinances. And that's common everywhere in the city. Where the mechanism I just talked about, where that occurs is when you don't want to rebuild, you want to add a level on top of your house, you want to expand, add a room onto the side of your house or increase the footprint, but use the same structure. That's where that process comes into play. But again, the involuntary, if your home is damaged involuntarily, you can rebuild that, you get a building permit. We're usually working with insurance companies at that point, but there's no extra approval process required other than a building permit. So that's kind of the big one where there were some suggestions made by residents of how to change that section that I felt had some negative unintended consequences of just establishing a cutoff date and saying anything that was existing before this date is just grandfathered in and considered legal. But where we have a code already that deals with non-conforming structures everywhere in the city, we felt this language, just cross-referencing that existing section, is probably the most fair and equitable way. And it still does allow a lot of flexibility for probably the relatively small amount of homes that are already built within 20 feet of that creek that want to expand. I do want to note also, if you're along a creek, but your house is 20 feet away and you want to do an expansion, you don't have to go through that process because you're not non-conforming. Right.
And all these changes have been passed.
So that is the one
for the code.
They're in the final ordinance for tonight. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, and they've been approved and made sure that we didn't shoot ourselves in the foot or anything.
Yep. Any questions on this? That was kind of the main thing in the last couple of days. I've been hearing again of a handful of recommended changes were made, were recommended to staff. We thought they were reasonable, so we've incorporated them with the exception of the non-conforming structure provision because we have a code that we think pretty well deals with that.
So question, is the plan to vote on this evening?
Yes.
Is there any opposition to allow for this FAQ to be circulated a little more so people know what we're actually voting on instead of what they think we're voting on?
We could pull it off. If we
I have an
needed to.
opinion on that, if I may.
Okay.
We've given the public over 2 years to give public comment, and I think they frequently ask questions. It's great, and people can reference it at any point, but that is a peripheral thing to passing this ordinance tonight. I think it's urgent to have this passed. We don't want any new building requests coming in. We need to pass this, and I strongly recommend we make a vote tonight.
To clarify, I do want to just, this form wasn't sent, but there was some email dialogue back and forth in the past couple of days with it's an 80-person email chain. I assume they're mostly Little Cottonwood Creek residents that have these clarifications within the email chain.
That
So
FAQ went to them.
the FAQ directly didn't, but the ordinance did. And my response to our rationale for the non-conforming, an explanation of what I just told you was sent over email to that email chain. I didn't get any responses back on that in the last couple of days, but that was sent out to that large group.
Okay. No, this has been, when we started way back, we had FCAUS, which was a very minor. It didn't cover a lot, but it covered some things. So we did the initial version of sleds that took similar to this, it took a long time to get it up and going. I'm glad to see that we've come to where we have got a good update. But I'm ready to vote on it.
Did we get any comments, Mike, from your email?
No.
When did that get sent?
There were probably 3 emails back and forth yesterday. From a resident that's kind of taking the lead and communicating with us, copying everyone else on it, and my responses to them.
And it's hard because it's hard to get to everyone anyway, right? And I had someone call and said, how are you on Saturday, believe it or not? Why are you guys not allowing us to tear down and put new trees in? I'm like, holy smokes. That's not what's happening. There's still, some of that feeling out there of, you voted for what? But at the same time, I get that it's hard to get to everybody, and
Oh,
Yeah, we've tried to we've updated that same email group list regularly. Every time there's a revised ordinance published online, they get a direct email as well. Tried as much as we can to clarify that and make ourselves available for questions. I will just personally haven't received any calls other than by a few residents that I think the council's heard from as well. So 90% of the recipients of that list are not engaging at this point with staff. But I do think we're at a point now where if you're in a residential area or developing or have an existing residential use, there's a lot of recommendations for how to take care of your property and what to do during development, but there are not really any new restrictions that aren't already required by what we call other regulatory agencies, County Flood Control, FEMA, Army Corps of Engineers, and others. Other than we are just asking for them to provide copies of any permits that are already required when they do their building permit.
I would remind you, this is a lot more than just a riparian ordinance.
Mhm.
This is landslides, earthquake zones, all of those
Mhm.
ordinances that have needed to be updated to current code, because it's been 6 or 7 years since we put in,
2016, I think, was the last
since we
time.
did the last sludge ordinance and we get more information, better stuff, and so all of that needs to go to, if there's something that we have inadvertently missed that really is a onus on our current landowners, I would think that, we could certainly take that up again as a separate, focused entity and get the rest of the ordinance put in place, which would allow us to at least be up to date on all the rest of it.
Councilmember Hill, any thoughts?
I know this has been worked on for a long time.
Well, we'll do that. So, and then, and I think Councilmember Brackett brings up a good point. If there's something that we didn't know when we've missed, we can always bring that back.
We should always reserve the right to fix this mistake.
Yeah, very
there's gotta start sending it out.
okay. Perfect. Okay, and then item 7.2 for this evening is a consideration of resolution 2023-48, approving an agreement with Ben Collaborative for Veterans Monument Design Services. So I'm gonna have our city manager, Tim Tingy, just address this real quick for us.
Yeah, this is something we talked about with the Veterans Monument that the Historic Committee is really working on. This will allow us to kind of flesh out more of the details so we can start looking at additional fundraising opportunities and know more about what the cost estimates would be. So this is for $2,800 for Ben Services to provide that service for us, and we're recommending approval.
Questions, comments? Okay. Then we'll approve the consent calendar tonight.
Just for clarification, I suspect that 2016 date might be when we actually started this process, because I remember we asked for a continuance one time on sleds a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And one of the distinguished council members from District 46, and we waited a couple of weeks on that, and something happened, and now we're here, and that was not you, it was before you. So it's been a while.
Okay, thank you. So item 3 on our agenda is we're excited to have the Chief Revenue Officer for Centawave Broadband and Internet, Lab Marshall, with us.
Thank you.
So you all know the urgency that we feel as a council to allow fiber to get to every home. Whether or not they utilize it or not is another question, but for the opportunity for a home that has a home business that has 2 people working from home that needs a higher quality internet at their home. So we've been working hard, and Centawave came to us a couple of weeks ago and gave us some details, and so we thought it would be appropriate to bring them before the entire council, and so Lad, we'll turn the time over to you and look forward to your presentation.
Awesome. Thank you. Just get my screen shared here. Well, Mike, you're on a tight ship. right on agenda, so I'll try to keep it maybe a little short, but Centaway, just a little bit of background about our company. We are based in Salt Lake City and we serve the Wasatch Front and surrounding regions. We have residential, apartment, and business customers ranging from Bear River City in the north down to Payson, Springville in the south. And a little bit about Centaway is we do fiber optics. We provide service for, we also do microwave, and then we're a phone company. So we can do internet service, phone service, we can do co-location, other needs that maybe more advanced businesses have in addition to just small and mid-sized businesses. We have really developed a niche of helping serve underserved areas. We've been up Big Cottonwood Canyon for almost a decade now, serving some of that, and slowly the past 3.5 years, building more and more fiber throughout the canyon. And as we've done so, we've slowly been coming down the hill. But when it comes to telecom and internet, a really core belief that we have at our company is, you need to provide great bandwidth, great connectivity, but also really good customer service. And I think that's one thing that helps differentiate us from some of the other incumbents in the region and in the state, is our customer service. So we really are focused on our residential, business, and apartment customers. And I think they feel that. So because of that, we're one of the top rated providers in Utah. In terms of where we provide fiber, this gives you a little bit of a background. We have fiber in lots of cities. We are a Utopia provider, but we also do our own fiber network builds. Like I said, up Big Cottonwood Canyon, we've been building there. We have builds in Eagle Mountain and Riverton, South Ogden, and other cities. And in short, that in addition to some of our multifamily experience, I think has really led to us wanting to come to Cottonwood Heights. Yeah, if you have questions, go for it.
Up Big Cottonwood Canyon, how many of the addresses are serviceable?
That's a
Do you have
good
percentage
question.
or-
We're actively building right now in Silver Fork and coming down. There's small areas like Mill D and some of these other smaller areas that are
Is the idea
further
to
down
get
the
them
mountain.
all serviceable?
Yeah, we want to build the whole canyon. So we've worked closely with the BCCA, really tried to be part of an active participant up the canyon to help not only, some of the bigger people there, but also the small old timers that have had a cabin there for 30 years. So it's becoming a bigger percentage, and our plan is to service the whole canyon if we can. So high level, some of the things that we've partnered with in terms of apartments and developers is we've done communities, but we also do large apartment complexes. Some of the biggest and best properties in Utah we service that have either been some of the largest HOAs we also service, which an HOA is similar to a city, in my opinion. I mean, it's not just apartments, these are residents that own homes. So that customer service helps us, I think, stand out and have a lot of success in the HOA market as well. So these are just a couple pictures of some portfolio properties. In the end, like I said, the last 10 years or so, we've been up the canyon, in the last 3 actively building fiber up Big Cottonwood Canyon. This is kind of a cool shot on one of the pole lines that I liked. One of our techs sent in. Another thing that's different about Centaway, there are some providers that rely solely on contractors to do the work. We have, I think, 4 or 5 bucket trucks. We have 2 directional drills. So we have kind of our own crews that helps us, I think, provide better QC and make sure the quality of the construction is good. Obviously, when you're working with any community, there's a lot of communication that goes in, and that's kind of part of why we came to the city. We want to talk to you guys first and have really open dialogue and be a great participant in the community and help residents. So that being said, just high level, we're actively designing the whole city right now. We have started doing some work and permitted and on the east side and are working on lighting up our first network site in the city, which will from there kind of feed surrounding businesses and customers. We have a fiber ring in the Salt Lake Valley that we're working on extending to come into Cottonwood and kind of tie into that site, as well as bringing fiber optics from down the canyon to the same site as well. So
are the colors significant in some way?
no, these represent the 13 footprint. So we've broken the city into 13 footprints. This is kind of high level. And like I said, we're actively designing now. So purposely, we didn't kind of show all the little details on there, but this helps you kind of see the vision of the design. So starting from the east side, we plan on actively kind of growing and building that and spreading to the west and south. And are really excited about the community. We feel like it's a little bit underserved. There's not a lot of options here in the community.
Is your goal to get it to every household, fiber to every household? Or?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's our goal. I mean, that being said, we typically try to be prudent and smart, like any business, in the sense if there's not demand, if someone doesn't want it, then we typically don't build an area. So we'll pre-sign up, we'll market, we'll really make sure there's demand, and then the goal is to build the whole city. There are a lot of economies of scale kind of on the flip side of that coin. When you're building neighboring neighborhoods, it does help, even if there's not as much demand as maybe might justify building it, to kind of do it, if that makes sense. So we want to make sure there's demand. We've already had, good feedback from a lot of residents, and I think very confident that we can build to the whole city.
Could you give me a snapshot of your roadmap, what the timeline would look like, what
Yeah.
your plans are?
Yeah, I mean, I think we won't, on purpose, we won't get too specific. I think just in the sense of not wanting to. It's a public meeting, some of our competitors will see exactly.
Sure.
But high level, we're actively, like I said, designing and doing building now. Our plan is to work on a lot of the access level infrastructure that'll enable us to light up our first subscriber probably at the beginning of the year, January. And then we'll start doing other work as well, aerial work. A lot of the city, a pretty good chunk of it is aerial or served. Their utilities are served via pole lines with Rocky Mountain Power. So we typically follow the existing utilities. That helps minimize, disturbance, as well as kind of make it more efficient. So our aerial crews are our in-house aerial crews are actively building in Big Cottonwood Canyon now. And as the winter hits there, we're going to move them down here. So in November-ish timeline, we'll start doing work in neighborhoods where there's aerial and kind of getting some of that access level infrastructure, core infrastructure, so we can light up more customers. So after January in the spring, we plan on ramping up and starting to light up more and more of these footprints and residents. And I would anticipate by the end of the summer, we would have a majority of the city built.
So do you use a combination of trenching and the power lines?
So yes, we'll like I said, we typically, not always, but typically follow the power. And like I said, a lot of the city is aerially fed here. We will do traditional boring where we're doing road crossings or some of the main lines. So it's a combination. And obviously there are some neighborhoods that are all underground. In those situations, we do flyers ahead of our construction notifying residents, hey, we're going to be out here doing work. So we like to flyer, door hang, and then there's other ways of, Facebook, yard signs, mailers.
Just so there's not any confusion.
Yeah.
Trenching is not a micro trenching.
Yeah, we don't.
This is, because we currently don't allow.
We
that.
don't plan on doing micro.
But you do it more of a traditional
boring. So it's
boring or
it's a
what we
bigger,
would expect from an,
Like
right,
Utopia?
yeah,
right.
similar.
Actually no trenching. It's a combination of boring and using the power poles.
Yeah, aerial attachments as well as drilling. And then sometimes in the park strip, there's what they call a missile or a pneumatic missile. It can it's for smaller kind of neighborhood settings where you can place conduit and not drill. So we do a mixture of those, but that's not in the road. It's in the park strip typically. So I anticipate the impact to the city. I mean, I think obviously there's some impact when you do work, but a lot of the city is aerial, and I think it'll be much less than maybe some of the other options you've looked at.
So because you already have a franchise agreement with the city.
Yeah.
And because they wouldn't be doing micro trenching, they wouldn't need an exception to our current policy, so they could come in and do this with.
Yeah,
not
we're-
much further.
Have come in.
Yeah, yeah.
We're not asking for an exception. We're saying,
Yeah.
let's work together and let's help the residents.
When did your franchise contract with the city begin?
About a year ago or so, roughly. We knew Doug, we've done business stuff with Doug at he owns a business in South Salt Lake, I think. So we've known Doug for a long time, and it's sad about his passing, but that's kind of another way that we got connected with Cotton Heights. So former councilman.
And just to clarify, Councilmember Burrell, we have franchise agreements with a variety of different groups,
It's gotta be
from
at least
Utopia
10
to
or 12.
Gold
I
to-
mean,
yeah.
We've got about 10 of them on books right now.
Well, I'm just trying to understand this a little better because I know within actually the neighborhood I live in, some of my constituents have been a little distraught over the last several months with trying to figure out whether it was Comcast or CenturyLink who was spray painting and was about to bore into their new park strip that they just finished xeriscaping or this or that. And so certainly the boring idea is more appealing than trenching, especially as it pertains to our roads. And I just know that, we also have your competitors who are spray painting and boring and trying to complete so that, they can offer the higher levels of service as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of competition. We like competition personally as a company, and we're excited about coming into the market and competing. Our prices, I won't give exact numbers, but we plan on being very competitive. Not only with some of the wireline incumbents, but even with some of the 5G stuff out there. So we want to offer a very competitive price that value to our customers and helps them stay with us long term. We also plan on helping businesses here and providing speeds. So the speeds residentially will do multi-gig. So most folks don't get that, but that'll be available. So more than a gig, we'll offer that fiber directly to the home. And then also for businesses, we'll be able to offer speeds up to 10 gigabits per second as well. So
How do you find the aerial connections compared to buried cable as far as reliability and redundancy?
Yeah, I think overall it depends on the application in the area, but they're highly reliable. I mean, they provide you power typically, so people kind of get a feel for that. We go underground if there is underground utilities, like I said, and we like that. But where there's poles, we typically use them, but sometimes we don't. So in the canyon, it's a little different. Sometimes they get so much snow. We'll be strategic in where they're placed in relation to trees and so forth, which because they get so much snow up there, the snow loads can affect some of the lines. So
Right.
I kept it at about 10 slides. That's what they say is normally good, but we're excited. The mayor asked us to come present here and just kind of introduce ourselves.
It's like that central brown color.
You like that central brown color? Okay.
So I just want to make sure I understand one of the
Yeah.
last comments you made that
Yeah.
you were thinking if you started in this next calendar year that you felt you might get to every business and resident within a 12-month period of time.
I said hopefully by the end of the summer we'd have the majority of the city built. I think by the end of next year, yeah, hopefully we should, assuming there's demand and no foreseeable.
Next calendar year.
in
So we're already,
2024.
so we've already started, like I said, we've already started.
Yeah, that's.
We plan on hooking up our first customer in January. And then going from there, really ramping up in the spring and the summer and having, a large portion of the city built by the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, and then keep working to hopefully build the whole city.
A lot of progress in 2024 and then
Absolutely.
maybe some left over into 2025.
Hopefully not, but yeah, it's possible. But I want to get, the goal is, there's a lot of efficiencies in terms of building it in a timely manner, not dragging it on. So it's a matter of using our own crews and, qualified contractors and getting that right balance. And then working with the city and the planning and just making sure to go through it at a good pace, not too fast.
Well, of course, Mayor, the reason that I brought that question out is that, you know, one of our, as we've looked at the various providers, what's in my perspective, what's kept us from selecting one
Yeah.
is the incompleteness. They weren't able to get to every household within the city, with the exception of Google, and not to talk about your competitors, but I'm just finding it surprising that one of your competitors, knowing that that's, I believe, one of our criteria, that we were looking for a company that can service all the households and businesses. I just find it surprising that you would be able to, your company would be able to accomplish what your competitors have not in years, and you're thinking you can do it in a year. I just find that surprising.
Well, I think there's a lot of synergies. Like I said, we already have facilities close by, a lot of customers in the area surrounding cities. And with what we're doing with our own crews and, you know, the right contractors, I'm very confident that we can, like I say, build most of the city. We are going to be smart. Like I said, if there's a whole neighborhood that no one wants it, we're not going to build it. But that's where we go around, we talk, we pre-sign up people, and the demand that we've seen, I'm very confident, I think we'll.
Well, and I was probably, just to be clear, some providers have said, I mean, I think all of them could go to every address. There's been some unwillingness to commit to that from some. Like Utopia is by definition is a build out, but the issue there was a bond. So there's, I mean, different things. It's not that it's impossible, it's just finding someone who's committed. I like the idea that you have done some lower density areas.
Oh, yeah.
You've done, going up the canyon.
Up the canyon is more challenging than this higher density construction. We've also done some builds in Eagle Mountain where there are 5-acre lots, and, you know, areas that got.
Because those are some of the places in our
area that got skipped because it was too hard by someone else. We did it, and, you know, had very high take rates, very happy residents. And I mean, that's kind of our goal, to come in, add value to our customers, and be an active participant in whatever community we're part of. And
especially in those people down Little Cottonwood Creek Valley that have the 1/2 acre and larger lots all through there.
That's where this originated. It was from Doug. So another aspect that he talked about briefly is so that, you know, they would be the end customer as well. So they're not, you know, Utopia had the model, they lay the fiber and then let people bid to sell it to you. And same way would be the company that laid the fiber and that also supported it. And
we're vertically integrated. We are, you know, we are a Utopia provider in certain, you know, cities. So we participate on the Utopia network.
You're an ISP.
We're an ISP on the Utopia network, but we also have our own networks. So Utopia is a great partner, nothing but good things to say about them. But in this case, like I said, we plan on building our own network.
So
the residents.
for 1 gig service to a house, is there, what's your approximate cost per month?
It would probably be in the 60s, right around there, maybe even lower. But yeah, so I think
Plus, or is that an inclusive?
What's plus?
Well, I mean, are there service?
I like
and
that.
tax
Plus,
and-
it's got a good name.
Plus-
I mean, you get your typical cable bill or something like that. There's always the cost, and then there's the fees and the taxes.
Yeah, our plan would be to, you know, minimal or no fees, just keep it real simple. I think that's what people like. That's one of our hallmarks. Easy
Does the
for
city
us.
charge you a franchise fee?
I think there's certain ways you get revenue from stuff like
I
this.
think we probably do.
Lab mentioned to us as well that they would have a price point that you've talked about at 100 to 200 megabyte. Is that right?
Yeah, we want to do a multi-100 megabits per second offering for in that $40 range or lower, somewhere right around there. We feel like that's very competitive and sets us up for the future. You know, there is a lot of competition. in
What's the
telecom.
program called for underserved or low income residents?
Yeah, affordable connectivity program. We're also a participant of that. It allows residents to get a $30 credit if they qualify with the FCC. And then they get a discount on whatever plan they choose with us.
Students, especially Title I type students or families or something like that, can get $30 off of it. If they've got a $40 offering, then you've got a pretty,
It can
Reasonable
be,
rate.
yeah, very competitive. And very fast, so great value that I think
Yeah.
residents can afford, so.
Well, that's perfect.
We
Thank
hit
you.
15 minutes, oh,
Oh,
20,
You
hey,
know,
we're right, hey, 20 minutes,
we're right there. So
it's a tight ship.
thank you for coming. We appreciate it. I think it's been really helpful to the council and I think anybody listening is probably pretty excited that
This is exciting.
there might be a solution for fiber to every home and within a year. So that'd be great to the home. So great. Okay, thank you, Ed. Appreciate it. Okay, we have three staff reports, and if you notice, there's two A's. So the reason for that is they're gonna kind of go together there, and we're actually gonna start with the second A first. So we'll start with, if you first off, if you remember our retreat. Our administrative and fiscal services director, Scott Jurgis, gave us a 5-year kind of roadmap of what our budget was looking like. And we talked about that as a council. And now that our fiscal year is complete, we wanted to get an update to that with some better numbers. And actually, Scott's going to give us some good news on that front. So Scott, we'll turn the time over to you, and you got a few minutes to go through both items. So
All right,
the second one will be the budget amendment that we briefly mentioned.
okay, so. This used to print out on a great big 11 by 17 page, and that was getting a little unruly because it spilled over onto a second page, so. I've reduced it down to a landscape version on letter, and so the main summary is on the first page, and then there's some details that go into. Kind of what's feeding into the projection on the following pages, and I'll kind of go through it. So looking at what we've got in front of us. The top line is 21-22, and that's the actuals that we recognized in that fiscal year that ended a little bit more than a year ago. 22-23, we're looking at a projection still. We have not yet finished our audit. We have our auditors coming at the end of the month, and they'll be looking at things. But right now, it looks like we're going to land at about just under $9.5 million in ending fund balance, and that's total ending fund balance. It would mean that we would have about $7.2 million available for appropriation at the end of that line at the end of the year. And that's quite a bit better than what we had projected when we put together our last projection in January, and even what I thought it would happen as we were heading towards June and the end of our fiscal year. And I'll kind of go over what we saw that happened in terms of that as we move forward.
And what percentage is that, real quick, Scott? It's a percentage that we have to worry about before.
Look at this.
If you don't have it, that's okay.
Yeah, I don't have it off the top. We're in the
33 or
we're in the
pretty close
30s
to that.
area. Yeah, I can't remember the exact, but we're in the 30s area on that. I can look at another document here in a second and tell you that. These little numbers right down here at the bottom are how much we are either better or worse than what we saw in our prior 5-year plan that we put together in January. So we're $1,376,000 better in ending fund balance than we predicted that we would be at the end of June when we projected that in the beginning of January.
Yeah.
So that kind of goes through, and you can kind of see that all through as we go through that. Most of that, as we go down to, what happened here in this first little section, it's mostly revenue driven that got us to that point. The underexpend and expenditures was about where we thought that was, within about $100,000 of where we thought that would be. The main areas where we saw everything, so property tax came in pretty much dead even where we thought it was. We're within $1,000 of where we thought we would be. Our annual sales tax came in much higher. We had budgeted a $1.6 million increase. However, we had actually realized $288,000 more than what we had budgeted to be in there. We had budgeted 8.8 million. We got almost 9.1 million in terms of that revenue. And then our energy use tax we had budgeted a $250,000 increase, but we actually got $356,000 more than budgeted. And so the energy use tax is on both natural gas and power that's sold within our city. And so what I think that what mainly drove that is increases in the rates, not that the city was charging, but that the companies like Dominion Energy and Rocky Mountain Power are charging for their power and their gas. And therefore that drives an increase to us because ours is a percent on whatever they sell. And then we saw on Class C roads, we had put in an increase of 10,000 and we actually saw $200,000 more than what we had in budget. And that is a cents per gallon. It's different on diesel and on gas, but it's around 30 cents a gallon that we get on that. And that's distributed based on population throughout the state. With our population being stagnant in a great way, we don't have a lot of growth in our population. It stays very similar year after year. But other growing communities, I kind of made assumptions, and I think it would be easy to make these assumptions that extra fuel that's sold throughout the state would likely go to those growing communities in terms of the tax that goes on that. However, we're seeing big increases in that tax. We don't get a lot of insight into that. It comes from the state tax commission. So it's a good thing that we're getting additional revenue, but understanding the dynamics behind it a little harder to get because we just don't have the visibility.
Well, we have so
to that.
few people that have gone to electric cars. I mean, the vast majority of people, 98% drive fuel,
Well,
combustion. So I
another
mean, there's a
thing-
lot of fuel being
Yeah.
sold and apparently that's the way we like it in Utah.
Well, and diesel is at a higher rate, and as long as we have more goods and services being delivered in the state, whether it's food, whether it's, goods and other things, that's going to drive an increase in the taxes that are available for distribution. So, the dynamics of all that is kind of hard to, put your head all around. There were other taxes and part of the other taxes is our transient room tax, which we saw our actual be about $155,000 more than budget. Since this last year that we're talking about has finished, we've right-sized, if you will, most of these budget items related to revenues to what we actually were seeing. And so we shouldn't see this huge influx of money at that time. One last thing I'd like to talk about is in other revenues, we had actually seen 410,000 more than budget, and that's primarily due to interest.
Yeah.
Probably right near 400,000 of that is due to interest because the interest rates just went way high since January, and we saw a lot more revenue as a result of that.
That number looks good for probably the next calendar year, but then we might see decreases.
Yeah. So we'll have to watch that because if we do see decreases coming, we'll want to make sure that we reflect that in our projections and eventually in our budgets as we are developing that.
Right.
And I was
How
a
did
little
you use that
conservative.
number in the projections?
I have budgeted a little conservative. I budgeted about $300,000 net in our general fund, and we're going to get closer to 400, a little better than 400. So we're kind of got a little hedge in there where, if interest rates drop a little bit, we're not going to see this huge, oh no, the sky is falling kind of moment.
Right.
So.
Okay, great.
So that's the current year. In terms of our other stuff, our under expend ended up being 653,000. We are usually projecting in the $700,000 to $750,000 range. So we were right in that range of where we kind of thought that would be. The other items that are in here were just basically the budgeted items. And I'm not going to go through a lot of that because we've done that in multiple meetings and not a lot of changes in some of that. Going to our current year. Again, we've gone through a lot of meetings where we talked about what we've adopted in the budget and everything. So I'm not going to go into a lot of things, but in terms of our projection, I'm going to kind of outline where we saw some differences. So one of the things, as you look through, we had adopted a 3.5% COLA. When I put together this projection back in January, I had put in, I can't remember now if it was a 6 or 6.5%.
6, I think.
6% COLA. So that saves us about every percent saves us about $100,000. So that would be $250,000 of savings from the projection in January to what we actually adopted. We had seen a one-time, well, this actually ends up being ongoing change in personnel turnover savings, where we have somebody who's at the high end of the scale retire, and we replace them with somebody that's lower in the pay scale, that saves us money, and the net of that was about $200,000 in that given year. The fire increase, I think we had actually had that in there at about $270,000, and that ended up being $212,000. So that was a savings to us. A few other little things that kind of went through here. In a general sense, we generally project outside of fire, we generally had been projecting about $200,000 of net increases. And you can see that there was about 126 here, 94 here, 112 here, and then some other little things. So in future years, we've increased that to be about 300,000, because we want to be more realistic in what we're actually seeing as increases. And we are seeing some inflationary type increases in some of the things that we're purchasing. Computers is one of those areas where we're seeing higher than normal increases in terms of the costs. In terms of other things where we saw benefits, and Hillside Plaza, we put in $561,000. We had originally projected that to be $1.1 million. Now it will eventually get to that level, but it goes 516,000. Then we add about another 300,000 to it. And then in the third year, we add about another 175,000 to it, and actually get to that $1.1 million net expense in Hillside. So over time, we'll get to that $1.1 million. Just how the debt was structured, we had a soft intro into that. The other thing that I have not done in this
for that, Scott, is multifold, but one of them is to allow us some time to decide what we're going to do with the property, how we're going to go about it, whether we're going to land lease to developers to cover the debt service, how we're going to go from A to Z to get that done. So I think the way that you help structure that is perfect.
Yeah, and the first year, we only saw a half year's worth of debt service payments. So we didn't see a full year,
Right.
because we weren't sure the timing of when all that was going to occur as we were going into that too. Another thing that we saw, we did transfer in some money, $100,000, to help offset some of our initial costs, our due diligence costs, and different things like that. And we saw a couple other things that came in, but these other things are one-time transfers. We had transferred a little bit more than $1 million for the public works building to cover that, and we won't need to do that ongoing. And then we had transferred in $828,000 for some stormwater stuff from Keswick Road that, again, we won't have to redo year after year on those kinds of things. So overall, we did see some savings in this particular year. So if we jump back up here into our projection, and you look at these small numbers up on this blue line, you'll see our ending fund balance here of $8,056,000 is about $2.4 million better than what we had projected us to be at the end of 2024, about a year and about 9 months from now. And so that's a really good thing at that point in time. Moving to 24-25, we're seeing, again, certain new growth still occurring. Our property tax, we still project about $50,000 a year. It'll go above that sometimes and below that sometimes. Last year we were $39,000. And so we'll see that go around. And sales taxes, we have several forms of sales taxes. We have our normal sales taxes, we'll call it. We have the county transportation sales tax that was voted in by the voters. We have other aspects that are kind of sales tax related. And so overall, we put in $700,000 of sales tax increases. The reality is, in our base sales taxes, we'll probably only see maybe $400,000 to $500,000. The rest of it will be in the other sales tax areas in terms of where we see that increase. And then there's Class C roads and franchise taxes and so on and so forth, where we projected another $100,000 of net increases. So that kind of outlines the increases, $850,000 of net revenue increases in that particular year. The overall expense increases are expected to be closer to $1.5 million. And so going over what we have included, we've included a 2% COLA. Our regular merit and increases for health and dental, we've put in 5% as a holding amount. And then in URS, we're not currently projecting any increases. As interest rates go up, URS shouldn't need increases. And we could actually potentially see some slight decreases in terms of our contributions needed there. So we'll kind of watch that. They tell us about, I don't know, maybe about 4 months before the year starts about where we should be, and we'll keep an eye on that. Fire, we've, elections seesaws in every other year. Sometimes years it's in, sometimes years it's out. Fire, we put in a $200,000 placeholder, and that equates to about a 5% increase. The annual unidentified increases, this is the 300,000. This kind of gets eaten up in various ways and means, you know, inflationary type things. Maybe we have a contract that we have and it goes up, you know, different things that go on throughout the year. We put in a liability insurance increase inflator of 35,000 a year. We'll probably need that at least for 2 years going out. Thereafter, we're not sure. I've left it in for all 5 of the years, but the past 2 years it may be needed. But it's a relatively small amount in terms of our total budget, so I just kind of left that in. This particular year, our public works building will probably be coming online around that same time when this budget goes into effect. And we will see some savings and some cost increases at that time. Some of our storage facilities we won't need, and our rental trailer over there we will no longer need. So that's savings to us, but we will also experience some increases in the way of some IT costs, some power costs, and possibly some natural gas costs to heat the building and things over there. Road projects. So we had initially, when we developed our projection in January, had put $2.75 million in for our transfer for road projects, and we didn't put any inflators into that. Well, in looking at what's happening with especially road construction costs, we have chose to put in a $250,000 per year inflationary base that's roughly 10%. So 2.75 is our base. So we put this in going out in perpetuity, and that gives us the ability to still do the same amount of work in each of those succeeding years as we go forward. It's around a 10%, which would kind of decrease because at 250,000, that won't get quite worth 10% in the future years. So in the, you know, through years 3, 4, and 5, whether you would need that or not, we'll have to see as we move forward.
Can we assign some blame to Matt at all for that?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Hey.
Too many Matts.
Yep.
So can I just a point of clarification, when we talk about this as road projects, this is really road maintenance, right?
It really is.
Purpose and maintenance. It's not really all the projects that we often are talking about at the table, improvements for safety and other things, does not fall in this roughly $3 million.
For the most part, I would say yes. It's mainly, you know, your slurry seals, your sealers, your crack seal, and your grinds and overlays occasionally when you need those on the 5-year.
And rebuilding.
Yeah, when we do reconstruction,
Yes.
there are those types of things in
Yes.
there.
Yeah, so could include, if it was a reconstruction, it could possibly address some of those, but it's just, it wouldn't be like taking a road that's in good condition and reconstructing it or anything like that. And then this particular year, the hillside funding goes up 395,000. So you're getting close to that 1.1 million at that point in time. You're about 900,000 at that point. And then other bond changes, we actually see some savings of $114,000 in this particular year. And that's because one of the 2 bonds that we have that pay for our public works equipment drops off. It's the smaller of the 2, but it drops off in this particular year. And that pattern goes out and doesn't change drastically in each of the years going out. And so I don't know if there's a lot of need to continue to go out in those years. But one of the places I would recommend, if you go back to that first page, you can get to about 2025, 2026, and still end that year positive in terms of your fund balance. And you'll have about $837,000. Now that, I'm a little pessimistic, where I'm probably estimating revenues at a slower growth rate than I'm estimating expenditures. So the reality is you'll probably land a little better than this. Exactly where is hard to say, but you would land that year with still having about $800,000 available for appropriations and a net ending fund balance of $3.1 million. So now that could change and push out an extra year, but that depends on a lot of factors. Another thing that I've talked about that's not considered in here is timing of what happens with the hillside property. Do we dispose of that property at some point in time, and what happens with it, and what's the effects of that? I didn't put anything in there because that's a big question mark. We don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
The other thing that is not in here is it does not include any telecom tax. Telecom tax would get you $350,000 a year of net revenue. And so, you know, any of those kinds of things that you were, if you were to do, would change this as we go out. Also, on the flip side, if you decide, oh, we want to add a whole bunch of projects in here, that would also change it too, but the other way, where we would potentially have our fund balance going away quicker. And I did a look from January to July of this current year, our CPIU, just for, you know, looking at it, it sits at 1.9% at that point in time. And so if you were to project that out to the end of the year, we'd be in the 3.25% if everything stayed the same as those first 7 months. So that could change. And different things. So those are kind of some of the things I'm seeing and that I've put into this. As I've talked with Tim, as I've talked with other department heads, and everything, but it does not address any real big changes to the current level of funding that we have in the city in terms of FTEs and other things along those lines. So any questions on that before we move forward? Questions?
No, thanks, Scott.
Okay.
So can I say something about
Yes.
the budget adjustment first? Are you ready to go into that, Scott?
Yep.
Thank you.
So over the past few council meetings, we have talked about different items with you that we talked about a budget adjustment with. Some of the items are that Scott will go through here includes a revenue component in that. Some of these do not. So as you recall, we talked about the police radios a few meetings ago about the need to move forward with that. We received some direction on that and said that we would bring it forward in a budget adjustment. In addition to that, the South Valley Chamber membership, we're doing some legwork on that right now, and we'll bring forward an agreement with that legwork and research for you to consider an upcoming meeting. But we've included these items in here, as well as the additional officers for traffic patrol. We talked about that in a past meeting. So the reason we don't have this as a decision tonight, we want to have the discussion. We put these in here for you to consider, but it's something that will have to be discussed and brought forward, especially like on the South Valley Chamber item. We'll bring the full picture to you at the next meeting for your consideration of this. You can add items or you can subtract items depending upon that. So I want to make sure that you're clear on that as we go through this, and then I'll let Scott address it.
So one note is the items that are highlighted green are items that were budgeted last year, and we're bringing them forward because we weren't able to complete them. So just know that those are kind of, I kind of refer to them as like a rubber stamped kind of things. They're
Carried
already
forward from a previous, yeah.
Yeah. So and they're organized by fund, so you don't see all of those things all together. So in our general fund, we've got the police radios. We've been having a heck of a time trying to buy police radios. We finally were able to actually receive a few of them recently. And then it's this $50,000 item. We finally received those just like within about a month. As we talked about earlier, we want to buy the remaining amount of radios that we will need so that we're prepared for when they flip the switch and go to the new frequencies. To do that is $175,000 additional, so that we have the money to able to pay for and buy all those radios.
And if you'll remember that in Chief Russo can address that. That's a state mandated UCA, Utah Communications Authority requirement that's going to hit all cities and all entities that have.
You're
emergency
correct, the
service.
legislature played a part in it as well, and that's why we can't get the radios. Everyone's trying to buy from Motorola or L3 Harris and they're backlog, but we're getting there.
We think-
We're waiting.
Yeah, we think we can get these ones by the end of our fiscal year.
We better. Or we'll be using smoke signals or tin cans and string.
Yeah.
So one of the two.
So the next few items are, I'll call them revenue neutral, where there's revenue to offset the expense. So police marathon overtime, I put other expenditures in here, and actually I did not change this overtime in here from the last year. Those are inaccurate items. There's no other expenses. There's just overtime of $6,305. The police DUI shift overtime. So there's two amounts in there, 7476 and 3382. And those are that's overtime shifts that we get reimbursed from the state for doing. And then they sold a Harley Davidson motorcycle that was used for police services, and they want to be able to capture that money and use that to purchase other vehicles for fleet. This is a new item, and it has been talked about some. 3 additional police officers for traffic patrol mitigation for the canyon areas in the winter, and then throughout the city and at other times. Annual salary and benefits is about $120,000 per year, plus another $40,000 for an additional police vehicle, and then $18,000 for the radios for the 3 officers. There could be, I have put in here right now, 0 in terms of offsetting funds. There could be some funds to help offset those costs. If there weren't, it would be a $418,000 cost for the city.
Is that an annualized cost?
That would be an annual, yeah. And so we would need to consider what we want to do with that, or, identify the funds to be able to offset those costs as we move forward. Because again, the impacts in the 5-year plan on, adding $400,000 in is quite significant. So
These are not
Radios.
on this 5-year plan.
they're not in there.
None of them are,
None of them are.
except for maybe the green ones.
The green ones are, yes.
Quick question, did we start that conversation about 2 officers?
I'm only aware of 3.
No,
Three.
talked about 3.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we're really looking for is for us to mitigate winter traffic on Wasatch Boulevard. We feel like there's it shouldn't just be our burden.
Yeah.
It's a state road. And so we are working with entities from other entities to help offset this cost. So that's not obviously in place where we can add it as a revenue item right now, but whether or not we move forward might portend whether or not, how these other entities come up with their decision.
Yeah. So that's in there now. Again, that's entirely at your direction, whether we, move forward on this as we, adopt the budget adjustment in another, or whether we delay or whatever we do, or, adjust the amount. That's entirely at your direction. The next item, number 7, is the South Valley Chamber membership. That's projected to be $20,000. Again, that is at your direction in terms of what we do, but I'm just including the amount in here as what that would cost if we.
And what we've done on that, and Mike can correct me, is we have reached out to those businesses that already have joined the chamber that are from Cottonwood Heights. We're trying to get feedback from them on how they like the services. And then we've done a survey. We sent a survey out to all of the businesses to see if there would be interest in this, and we're waiting for responses on that. So we hope by the next meeting, we will have that information for you to consider with an agreement as well. So that's where that's at.
And then number 8 is Public Works would like to purchase 2 of the VMS trailers. That's the trailers you can park, and it will, give you a message as you're driving down the road. So they can say, construction in this area, congestion for whatever, so the drivers can be aware of what's going on.
This, Scott, if I may, and Robbie might have something, this is also for winter, when there's canyon issues. We're putting those out for traffic as well, giving that message.
Do we have any currently?
No, we do not.
Is this one's just yellow lights, that type, or are they like,
The message.
you
They're
can
the
do
big message
cartoons
boards.
and like graphics and everything?
I don't know how to draw that well, but we
The
can.
ones that say like road closure.
Yeah, road
duty
closure,
construction,
canyon
whatever.
closed, avalanche closure till this time. Where they can actually do that from their phones and.
And these are
from their
ones,
desk.
these are ones that would go on our city-owned arterials,
We put them on our city roads. yes.
Yeah.
because I know UDOT has made the commitment, obviously, to have portable electronic signs in addition to their freeway signs this winter.
Yeah, these would
So
be
this
for
is-
our streets.
Oh, and while they may do on Wasatch, they may not do Fort Union or,
Oh, yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, I think they're talking SR 190 and SR, well,
Yeah.
maybe not SR 210, but SR 190 is people get off there. Like 215.
So in the general fund, the total would be, if we did all these things as outlined, it would be adding $727,000 of expense. And adding $27,000 of revenue, so a net impact of $700,000. If we were to adopt all of these items. Moving to the other funds, so in capital projects fund, there are two major rebudgets. One is the plethora of all of our different road and trail and other capital projects. That have been budgeted in prior years that are in various stages of completion. Of $4.6 million of expense and $1.2 million in revenue. And this all we has been budgeted and we have the money to cover it. And then also the rebudget of what remained for our public works building of $7,026,000. And that we have the money from the bonds and other things that we've done. The new item on this is number 3. This would be to add the curb and median on the westbound lanes of Fort Union and Wasatch in front of the 7-Eleven. $35,000 to cover that. I believe we might have UDOT doing the work for us and we'd reimburse them. Is that right?
Correct.
On that, and so that's what that's projected to do. We have about $300,000 of unbudgeted available funds in our capital projects fund, and we would recommend taking it out of there so we don't have to transfer additional funds in from the general fund for this. And then on our stormwater fund, it's just the rebudget of the unfinished stormwater budgets or projects. We have about 1.5 million of additional expenditures to rebudget into the current year. So that we can keep those projects running and moving. So that's the net of kind of what you see. So most of the back page is rebudget of things, except for the 35,000 there. And then the front page is kind of the page to focus on in terms of decisions and what have you. And we'll wait till we hear from you and you can change things. You don't have to change everything today. You can change things next week, or not next week. 2 weeks when we come back to adopt the budget.
Have we talked about,
is this public? Is this on for public hearing tonight?
Public hearing, yeah,
no, the budget amendment, public hearing, not voting.
yes.
Well, okay, but the public hearing
Yes,
is
the
on
public
for
can
tonight.
comment on it.
Okay,
So I know we've, so the upgrade in police radios are being required by the state. And yet they're not offering any money to cities to do that, correct? Or am I wrong in that?
Well, to big cities, no.
To our
Small-
size of city.
Yeah,
It-
yeah, small
big,
rural
small, whatever you
areas.
want to call it, not us.
So
Rural
maybe
areas.
that's a lobbyist
We're a big small fry.
point we could include that, I mean, this isn't a small expense.
It's huge.
Especially when it's required from them that the state participate. The state's the one that has to figure out what to do with all their money. We don't have that, luxury. So maybe we'll work on that. So, okay,
Well, I want to comment that I'm very appreciative that the mayor has gone to bat with agencies discussing the shared challenges that we have on our SR 190, 210 area. We always call it Wasatch Boulevard. I've decided calling things Wasatch Boulevard really gets confusing, but that's so important, and I really am appreciative that we're seeing something appear here for us to consider in the way of mitigating these supreme challenges that occur in District 4 that are getting worse year over year. And I want to also thank Public Works. Boy, Matt Ship left at the wrong time, but the police department for working so hard on the intersection of Fort Union and where SR 190 and 210 come together there, Wasatch Boulevard and Fort Union. All of these collective improvements are so needed and important. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And may I just quickly just say that you're right. The problem is growing year over year, and this year will be particularly interesting because, as you know, with the breakup of UPD and the sheriff's office, we look forward to a partnership with Rosie and the sheriff's office. We have a good relationship with her. She won't have those same resources from Mill Creek and Holiday and Midville that she had previously. So we need to have that because those other agencies won't be here to assist up there.
Yeah.
She can't call them to help anymore.
I'm gonna ask you for.
Thank you. Any other?
Yeah,
Oh,
I've got,
go ahead. Okay.
probably give me about maybe 10 minutes on this specific subject. Chief, you may be able to just do it verbally, but like a tracking of the officers that we've had. I know we lost a few 2 to 6 years ago for various reasons. I don't know if it was 3, but maybe at least include that in somewhere. I wouldn't mind just seeing where we are. If this puts us back to where we were, if it puts us a little bit ahead. That's kind of.
I'm glad you asked that. These are not truly new FTE allocations. This is replacing the ones that we were defunded a few years ago. So that number puts us back up to where we were. Those were traffic officers that are no longer here. So
I thought we just had 2 traffic officers. Was I mistaken?
well, we had a third one as well. So 2 on motors. That's what you're probably thinking.
Okay.
So
All right. The other one has to do probably a little bit more with this. Here we can get a map of the city up there. Paula could. I just wanted to bring this up. I do notice this goes beyond my existence here, but I would note that whoever's going to replace me is also in the room. Because I talked to Matt, we've got our 5-year road plan in place, and we've done it. Unfortunately, there are 3 sections in District 2 that are in rather significant need of reconstruction now. 4 of them actually, 5 including Prospector that's up in District 4. If you go up to Town Drive, those roads are in really bad shape. As I look at the 5-year plan going forward, there are 3 more areas here. Let's see where we at in this area.
Paula, can you turn on the aerial down at the bottom, the satellite?
Dale Road,
The satellite.
Where it says layers.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
They're all areas that were targeted to be fixed or improved. Last 2 years ago, last year with the slurry seal or overlay or something like that. But when we went to do them, it turned out that they were in such bad shape just here east of the rec center, roughly this area. There's 3 sections there that are on the plan to be rebuilt. Unfortunately, rebuilding, I think Matt said that we're spending $1.5 million a year on those, and that pushes those projects. Town is getting it done this year. Prospector is getting it done this year, which is great. They're neat there. If you go up there, it's gross. Those other areas though are put out 2, let's see, this year. So 1, 2, and 3 more years. What I have been hoping to do is we could find a way to accelerate some of that reconstruction from our fund balance and then allocate fewer funds for just doing the maintenance parts in future years. And that's where I've been looking in here to see if there's some way. It's challenging, but that's something that I would like to request. And I certainly want Sharon and Suzanne to hear that because as I've been up and going through these areas, those roads are in really bad shape. If you want, go take a drive downtown or on Dale Road or on Bridgewater and some of them. And they have already waited our first entire 5-year plan, only to say, well, you're too bad to fix, so you're gonna have to wait even longer. It would be nice if we could find that way. As Scott said, possibly a telecom. Could come up with $1 million of that. Maybe we could move some of our public works funding from year 2 and 3 to maybe to year +1, and then just not allocate it in the next 2 years. I don't know.
That's currently budgeted for when? Those, is it 2 roads or 3?
Well, I don't know the specific area. The
There's-
way it's laid out, we've allocated about 600,000 for maintenance. And then the rest of those monies is for reconstruction, if you will.
I wish I had
So,
the map. I don't.
and so I don't know exactly right now, but I do want to caution, if I can, against taking away the maintenance side of it, or we will be back in the same boat we're in now.
You
I
weren't
was-
suggesting taking away.
Keeping the maintenance. I was just saying borrow from our fund balance to do to do
accelerate
reconstruction sooner
reconstruction
and then do less reconstruction. So we would get back. So hopefully after the 2 or 3 years, we're in the same spot that we were, the same spot that we are. That's tricky. That's a finance thing there. But it's if you go through those neighborhoods, part of it is they've waited 5, now it's 6. And you're looking 7, 8, or 9 before, and they're driving on there every day. So that's my request for as you go into the next budget year to see if there's possibly a way to fund that. And get
Maybe
them
Matt,
taken
if you
care of.
want to bring to us when that's scheduled to be reconstructed, those 2 roads, if it is.
Well, I just need to know what I just heard area. I didn't hear any specific,
Well, they were,
because the town drive area
That's
is
this
broken
year.
up into 3 sections.
this one and this was due for this year, but there was here, and here.
Yeah, those are all broken up into 3 different
That's
sections,
3
that whole area.
4 years beyond what you're currently
Correct.
designed. But again, my request is you take a hard look at it and see if there's a way to possibly mitigate that for those people. We finally got to the 2825 East right out on Fort Union. They had a long wait to get their roads fixed, and they look a lot better now, but anyway, that's
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I appreciate it, Scott. Councilman.
I was bringing it to Sharon and Suzanne's attention too. Somebody wants to bring it up.
Duly noted. Okay, Scott, anything else on your end?
No,
Thank you for that. Appreciate all the hard work that you do, and it's an
These
important job.
reports are awesome.
Yeah, they're amazing. Thank you for breaking it out into layman's terms for us. Yeah. Okay, so the last item under staff reports is a continuation of our discussion from our previous meeting, which is the federal road projects and the Transportation Alternatives Program, TAP, that we call it, funding that we are as a council going to direct which projects to be done. So let me, are you ready to take that, Matt?
Whenever you're ready for me, man.
Okay, yep, we'll turn it right over to you then. So,
Okay, I will briefly go over the projects that are proposed, and then the discussion can ensue on that. This is for letters of intent to Wasatch Front. Those letters of intent are due at the end of this month. After those letters of intent are received, Wasatch will categorize those. And if they like them, they will ask us to present application for funding. And that comes due in December. So as we're going through these, this is the first one to discuss. This is Project Highland Drive Trail. Let's call it, we'll, for lack of a better term right now, we'll call it the Highland Drive Trail. That is being proposed along the existing frontage road and all the way up to the intersection of Fort Union and Highland. What's significant about this, it is somewhat of a regional trail. It's viewed as along here is the East Jordan Canal that's already built that goes to the back of Mount View Park. This red section that you see right here is money that we've received. We've received feasibility study money from Wasatch Front to extend this trail, to study extension of that trail to this point here on Highland Drive. The other areas, you know that these, this is City Hall. We've received funding for a trail along the north side of Bengal and partial and down. This money is already received. We're actually in design on that on this green section. The yellow section we applied for last year and we received that funding, and that comes up in about 2 more years. So the significance of this is it connects, it's a backbone that will connect these areas through here. So that's the first project.
Is that yellow section you said that's coming, is that? Or is that, does that include getting right of way?
No, it does not.
Really?
It's extension of, it's a 10-foot trail going through. We have a lot more devil in the details. So this is,
All right,
this is very high
So
view.
would we go through the public works corridor preservation for those?
If we need it, we can.
Okay.
We,
all right.
there are places where although it's very tight, there's tight in locations, we might be able to
So
fit those down through this area.
there's another round of funding opening up fairly soon.
Corridor preservation.
Corridor preservation, so maybe we put that on our radar.
So do either of these projects include an alteration to that intersection?
The design, this project we're proposing also takes into consideration the design of the intersection
And
to get traffic who cross Fort Union to this side.
And so is this TIP funding that would be built in 2025? Is that only strictly on the east side of the road?
That is correct. That is correct.
You know, I went over and rode the length of this a few days ago. And from the time, can you pull it down a little bit to include there we go. So from the time that anybody walking or rolling gets on this side of I-215, there's already a safe passage through the ramp there that puts you with minor modification onto the frontage road. And that frontage road, of course, that already is in place that runs the length here has a built-out sidewalk on either side of it. So I guess what I would like to understand is what would be modified about a frontage road that already has two, I'm sorry, like seemingly perfectly good sidewalks that run almost the entire duration of this strip.
Yeah, there's a sidewalk there. We're adding a 10-foot trail to open this up and give transportation alternative as opposed to the 4-foot sidewalk, just making it bigger for that, and also trying to improve the entrance into the city through using ground we already own.
So I guess I still don't understand, even in an illustrative or conceptual way, what it is that would be done. Are you saying that the existing sidewalk that runs along the west side of Highland Drive would be removed?
It possibly could. Like I said, we're working through those. We're trying to make the connection from the East Jordan up to here. And that's what we're trying to put together.
Again, I really struggle with why anyone, even if you lived here, certainly if you lived here, there's other than a few businesses here. I don't understand why anybody would ride their bike here to come here. I'm really struggling with what the benefit is to this project when there's ways to get here through here.
It's not
It
just
also
this
allows people up
neighborhood.
here to get onto the trail, right?
Yes,
People from where?
Down
people
where
up
the green, where
here
the green is to get to the canal trail.
gives them access
Safely.
down through here, and there are byways through here, the shortcuts.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is there's already
I don't think it's solely to get from.
Yeah, but I don't
Point A to
understand,
B.
this frontage road has no cars on it. Because all the cars are on Highland Drive. So I don't understand why we would demolish a frontage road that's intact, that has no traffic and is perfectly safe. I don't understand why we would demolish it to build a 10-foot when there's already plenty of roadway space, there's no cars. I really am honestly trying to understand. I think we should perhaps all go there and walk this space. Has anybody walked the space? So Sean, you have.
Yeah, there's a number of cars there parked and everything else during the
Just say, yeah,
day.
there's some businesses
Yeah,
there
the
that would
businesses.
debate whether there's an issue with
Yeah.
cars.
So I don't,
Exactly.
I don't think you have to look at it from getting from spot A to spot B. And I think this would even be more designed as somebody that wanted to ride their bike in the city and go from here and get to the.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. I'm saying it's perfectly safe to ride on that frontage road because you're not in any of the traffic of Highland Drive and you're separated by distance as well as a full sidewalk.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, let's move on, Matt. Yeah, thank you.
let's move on.
Yeah, the other project that we're looking at and proposing, and we thought about this the other night, Adam and I were sitting around brainstorming this intersection. There's a lot of challenges. This is the intersection of Creek Road and Danish Road. Trying to look at improvements of this section of road. We looked at a few things, different ideas, chicanes, bump outs, raised crosswalks and whatnot through here. The challenges we face are there's a lot of driveways that are very close to the intersection, so it makes it difficult to do a lot. But what we are looking at, and for your discussion and consideration, is actually coming in here and doing a raised intersection, which is once again pedestrian friendly. It slows. You do have to stop and to get through that intersection. One of the complaints we do here is people blowing through both of these stop signs and racing up and down this part of the road. So we're proposing as an intersection improvement, right now a raised
Do you
intersection.
have any examples of what that would look like?
I just think that
It's just
I
a
know the
table,
speed
you
table.
drive up onto
basically
it,
you're gonna go up this much, but you're gonna have the whole intersection and then you go down.
and it usually has a different texture on it for, just
You
the
can make it
reminders and.
Maroon.
Yeah.
Paint or whatever, sandstone colored.
Orange and blue.
There you go.
Go Bengals.
Okay, no, we put a gator right in the middle of it.
It's-
Oh, we're going.
From those who walk and roll, this is a really large intersection and you can kind of see that the Danish Road approaching as you approach from the south is a little offset. And so when it's all said and done, this is a really large area. And one of the ways to make intersections safer is not to have this kind of radius that allows cars to make their turn speedily. And just for council consideration, and I know we have to get an LOI turned in, and if we need to turn in an LOI based on this, so be it. But I would like the council to consider having sharp 90-degree angle corners that make the intersection not so generous. Because again, it comes back to in the mind of a motorist, whenever there's a large space, it signifies it's safe to move fast. And as we get into the rest of the project down Danish Road, as opposed to road widening, I am really in favor of islands that are landscaped or bulb outs that come in with landscaping that would not only beautify our city, but what the residents want here is 25 miles an hour on Danish Road. And I can tell you on my electric bicycle, I could go about 20 to 22 miles an hour. So you make a two-lane road with sharrows and large signs like we see them often in Holiday with a picture of a bicycle. And it says, bikes allowed or share with bicycles. And by doing that, you slow people down to 25 miles an hour. If we expand Danish Road that is inviting motorists to feel comfortable driving fast. And even if there's a bike lane painted, they will still pass you going 35 miles an hour, which is tied to the safe systems approach, which is slowing motorists down
So-
wherever humans are
So
exposed.
Matt, what I was wondering though, is there an example anywhere of an entirely raised intersection that we can look
These-
I
at?
was gonna look for one.
Around here, I don't know where one is, but these are typically, you'll find these in downtown areas.
Okay,
Where you have plazas around it. So it really becomes a walkability area. This is something as we were thinking about it, trying to figure it out. We looked at the tight corners on the radius, we looked at bulb outs. These are two offset intersections, so they make the design is difficult to deal with.
And it's not big enough to really make a circle
No,
work without some,
no,
because that would be.
the circle would work, but you have these driveways. You have a driveway here that
Driveways, there's.
goes right to the intersection.
And that,
so is this,
It's very
was this on one of the,
this was not on last
This-
time.
this wasn't on?
It was on the road, it was on here for safety considerations. This road was.
It didn't
Yes.
include the specific.
There was a
This is
specific,
more
this
specific
is something
than-
that we were sitting around
Okay.
brainstorming on. And
Okay.
Had something to bring
Great.
forward.
Love that. Love any ideas you can come up with.
This one is, we've seen this one before. This is, we call it a cycle track for lack of a better term. It's part of the Mid-Valley Active Transportation Plan. Proposed to have a separated bike path along on both sides of the road. Narrowing these section of road up using what's out there for sidewalk and new curb and gutter, as well as the cycle track. We have a large portion of area right through here. We've brought this and we applied before. We scored okay on it, but we went up against some other folks, and so we got ours. And this is another one. It's the same one, so we're bringing it back for your consideration. It is building like I said, the Mid-Valley Active Transportation Plan. I believe Midvale was part of it. I believe what other cities? Murray, yeah, those were all part of them. These areas, this holiday, this whole thing. And this would also tie into some of the work. I don't have the picture up here that we're doing a little further down to the east, down by the fire station, and where we're extending that. So we're taking sections as they're available and trying to build the system out as it comes up. So this is an elevated bicycle path, meaning it's got a curb and gutter and you're off of the road and you're away from it. There is some landscaping elements. Once again, so
Matt, that's
this is
pretty
that
cool.
program.
Painted bike lanes, I mean, I've been on them, they're kind of everyone abides by those. So to have it separated is, I think, pretty neat.
That's
Pretty good opportunity.
the best way to have them is to separate them for
Yeah.
sure, whether you separate it with a barrier or you elevate it on a curb, get it off and away from the road, have landscaping in between the road and that. So this is what this is
So
proposed.
the benefits would be separated bike paths to businesses that people could ride to do shopping, right?
Yes,
That's the benefit. for this
And
area?
it's, like I said, it's a benefit for this area, but as you look at it, I don't know what Midvale's doing, so I'm not sure when or if they were part of the program. They adopted it, so we assume they're gonna be chasing funds to build this. We're trying to start on our end, on the west end of town, and where we are able to, we're picking up property as developments come in and redevelopments along Fort Union and building this cycle track through here. And this is just the start for us. There's no incentive right now for these businesses, which are, fairly new, or I guess if you will, large, and as opposed to some of the older homes that might be changing or selling along Fort Union and creating either, multifamily housing or businesses. where we are able to capture that property when they do come in develop.
Redevelopment.
Redevelopment, there's the word.
Does it
I knew
reduce the
somebody would
number of
know.
lanes on there, or is it the same?
Yeah, we reduced down the lanes, because right now it is
That's what makes sense.
It is a
If it
huge-
continues through here to give people access to all of that. Because all of the other commercial and retail is up this end. The other thing that might make this a little more appealing is we did get, when we had the Walsh property get developed, easements for a trail that goes back in. Yeah, by there, that would be a bypass up to 13th East. So that could be another potential, but. My other comment on this is Fort Union is because it is with all those other things, sometimes it's easier to find other sources of funding too.
Yeah.
That you might not be able to get as easily on a Danish or a Bengal or.
So remind me how you said it was scored?
it
previously?
scored, I don't remember the exact score. It scored well. It's just that our other one on Island scored better, so they gave us a project, and that's the one they chose. I
Okay.
mean, it did well because it is a regional significance, and Wasatch was part of the plan development as well. So they like the project. They're just finding other connections right now.
Great.
Well, and I would also like to say that hopefully next year at this time, Cottonwood Heights will have drafted their safety action plan. And if the safety action plan is based on the SS4A program, I will read to you from SS4A. It will require that we identify appropriate target speeds for roadway designs with the goal of the safe systems approach for speed management framework, which is to enable agencies to match operating speeds with target speeds along corridors to prevent fatalities and serious injuries. And so once we use a more formulaic, systematic way to prioritize our projects and decide whether cars that are moving, 40 to 45, 50 miles an hour, is it safe? What level of safety do we need to provide for something like a cycling path here in order to avoid fatalities and serious injury? So right now, I'd like to talk in terms of, how do we prevent fatalities? But we're not set up that way yet in Cottonwood Heights, and I look forward to when we adopt a safety action plan.
Well, on that consideration, then this one would be lower on the consideration list because you would not want to encourage people to go to that road.
Yeah.
Which is, that's fine. That's what we're looking at. And that's why that's as we go and look at these projects. We need to decide what we like and don't and why and what we're gonna ask for.
Yeah. Great, Matt. Let's go
Sorry, I
on.
sent you a picture of one of those raised intersections. That shows it. It's not a good picture, it's give an illustration of what they look like.
You've seen in some town center. It's not it's.
Hang on. Oh, there it is.
I guess I saw enough examples of it when I was doing my
Share it here.
project. But of course, everyone should know what it's like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is an example of a elevated intersection, if you will. And this isn't obviously a downtown area where, like I said, you typically would see them, but this is
And so I
it's
imagine
similar to what we have.
the goal is that visually the driver, that
you could see it.
they think they could have.
It's there,
Yeah.
it's a changing
It's
color.
a visual and as well as a physical.
It doesn't impact snow plows, anything.
No.
It's just.
Yeah, to go up.
Great.
Just a little bit.
So far we've got the Highland Drive.
Well, that crosswalk is actually part of the Danish project. Isn't that correct, Matt? That's the northern edge of the Danish project that you would put as a singular project. That's how it appeared that's how I read it. But the crosswalk was the northerly edge.
Well, it's the Danish project, which is the next one. It ends at the intersection. It would be two different projects.
So you chose from our last iteration, which included considering a mid-block crosswalk for the more westerly portion of Creek Road, where the 60 residents had petitioned for a mid-block crosswalk near Elkhorn and Scandia across to Danish Oaks. So that has been taken off the table.
Well, it's because we're doing.
We were looking at the entire corridor, but there's not so we picked the intersection through from Touring Court. The question was from Touring Court. And originally I had it from Touring Court all the way down to 3,500. And in between safety, trying to figure out how we can do safety along that corridor.
Yeah, but of the projects that appear tonight, that has been
Well,
taken
he
off the
said
table.
The Danish, whatever's on Danish is coming up next. Right?
No,
Danish
on
is
Creek. He's
Creek.
Touring Court is no longer appearing.
No, we took from Touring Court to 3,500, as I explained last time. Doing a crosswalk is not a project.
I know, but I'm saying it doesn't appear in the packet tonight, or am I mistaken on that?
No, we're not proposing any crosswalks on this. No,
It's strictly the Danish.
it's the
strictly the raised
intersection. We're
intersection
proposing
only.
the intersection.
That's what I'm saying.
It wouldn't be eligible for the tap, but
I just want to go on record that
Yeah.
for my constituents who were so interested in that, that's no longer
Yeah.
being considered.
Well,
because it's not eligible.
that's,
No, it's not that it's not eligible, it's that the staff has made a decision that it's not.
no, that's not correct.
What is correct?
It wasn't.
A project that size doesn't go through Wasatch Front Regional Council. And to say it's not being considered by them, no, but that doesn't mean it's not considered by the council or by the city. So that saying that it's not being considered would be an overreach. It's still certainly something that's possible, although that's something.
No, I only said it's off the table.
For
this
tap funding, yeah.
Correct.
You
That's
know,
what
you didn't have
I'm
the
simply.
qualifier. That's where I want to make sure that we're not misinforming.
If council would like to apply for a crosswalk, council certainly can, if we're directed to.
Chances
And
of getting it would not be.
I will. In my opinion, it would be very, very low, but if we would like to apply, I am happy to do that. But I need to be directed on any of these projects. Council has to give direction on which ones you would like to see.
The reason, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason why the probability is low on that is because these projects are more transportation oriented projects with a larger scope than crosswalks, and typically WFRC looks at that as a city function to be able to implement our own crosswalks, the smaller elements. These TAP funds and things such as that, they're larger scale, larger scope projects than crosswalks.
Right.
That is correct.
Understood.
Mid-mark crossing with RFDs and even a raised crosswalk is maybe $10,000 or $20,000. It's not
Roughly
Hundreds or-
15 to 20,000.
$500,000, million plus.
I think the desire is for traffic calming and lower speeds. And the crosswalks are part of that, but a road redesign is what is needed.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, let's move on to the next one, Matt.
Okay, this is Danish Road. Where we talked up here is Creek Road. At this point on the top left, this has been proposed before, so we're bringing it back. We talked about improvements on Danish Road. This actually says 12-foot, they should be 11-foot lanes, and then adding a 4-foot bike lane on this road. It's a little narrow for it, but it does call for widening portions of this road through here.
So would that require corridor preservation fund? I mean, would we need to purchase land?
We would need to purchase land
Okay.
for some of this. We
Some
do
of the
have
west-
locations where we have
Side is.
existing. We propose, there is proposed sidewalk. You can see here in the red, filling in the sidewalk. This is on the west side of Danish Road, adding a proposed sidewalk. Once again, putting in the ability for bicyclists through here. This takes in and it ends down at the curve. You can see down here on the curve, but this continues on. Proposed sidewalk, filling in the sidewalk. There are sections of Danish Road where it's very narrow that could be widened to allow for more room for both cars and cyclists to go through there. So this is a proposal, some improvements, safety improvements on Danish Road. And this is the other proposal that we talked about it last time. We had the sidewalk was on there. I think we can, if we would like, we can push for the sections of sidewalk that are missing on Danish Road on the west side, get those closed down, close those gaps so that added measure of safety is there. But if you'd like, we can push a little harder and try to find more space to add in those narrow sections where we can add bike lanes and add or widen it such that we have enough space that we can have in those narrow spaces. If we don't want to do specifically bike lanes, then we can concentrate on those areas where it's very narrow, widening that to the appropriate 12-foot lanes where then you can have the bikes and the sharrows on that road, and you'd have room for them to be able to share and use the road together as opposed to a dedicated bike lane on that, which would require quite a bit of asphalt. The other we can work with, I think we can work within the existing right of way.
I think,
Do you want something?
Yes, I would like to comment, but go ahead, Councilman.
I'm thinking, this is an entire project feeds a lot more into the tap or tip or step, whichever programs that we've seen from what's at front.
The only issue being it's not a regional road, right?
It is not.
It's only a 25 mile an hour. Right now, the speed limit on Danish is 25 miles an hour. And the input that we're getting from the residents there is that they want cars to drive 25 miles an hour, not 35. And 35 miles an hour is what our speed machines are pretty well showing people are driving on Danish. And I would like the council to consider, I strongly favor finishing out the sidewalk so that Danish has continuous sidewalk along, it'll turn out to be along the west side of Danish. That I highly favor. But keeping roads narrow is what helps to keep cars going slower and doing things that get the cars to drive 25 miles. God forbid somebody gets struck. Better to get bumped at 20 or 25 miles an hour than a human getting struck at 35 or 40 miles an hour. So I would urge that we would do this as a phased project, get the sidewalks built and do road alterations. As I said, I think the residents, let's find out what the residents want. I believe we could beautify Cottonwood Heights by spending the money instead of buying more property to have wider roads. Instead, spend the money to landscape in islands, landscape in bulb outs that cool our air, add shade, and signal to motorists to slow down.
Okay, so as far as this not being a regional road, the chances of TAP funding goes down, is that correct?
The transportation alternative funds, I don't think, no. I think because this is filling in the gaps, if you will. I think we have a good chance on, I mean, I think this fills the transportation alternative. If you want to do the surface transportation or the STP, that's where you would apply with the STP for the, if you said, if, like we said, if we want to add, you know, make them 11-foot lanes and then do sharrows. We have that, I don't know how that will score because of the regional significance versus the transportation alternative and the safety issue on
tap
the
is a much
sidewalk.
smaller bucket, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
The
So-
We basically are gonna get one item that we apply for, but not being a not regional road doesn't hamper us then. We won't.
No,
score it
no,
all.
I don't think it will hamper us on the tap.
Okay,
So what was the other tap ones you were looking at? Was that the intersection there or
That would be an STP.
the intersection that's
The tap would be the Port Union and the Highland would be a tap program. Actually, I back that up. STP for Fort Union because there is road. There is, it really is a road project. Adding features to a road project.
right.
But once again, once we put the NOI in, we make application, we do work with Wasatch Front, and Wasatch Front is very good working with cities and saying, we feel like this program, this would fit better in these
Yeah.
funding sources. And we prefer, you know, it would help if you applied in that. And they're very good about that. So they'll help us. We'll make application what we think it is. They'll review it and then we'll apply for what they suggest.
Okay, great.
But I believe the Fort Union, if I remember, I'm speaking with Adam earlier, is is STP. And then the Highland Drive is TAP. This would be under TAP. And then. Did I have another project?
I think you had one more, didn't you?
So we.
Sorry, I've got so
Mayor
many jobs
and
going
council,
through my head.
we need your priorities. I mean,
Oh, this intersection's STP.
we need priorities. I mean, we typically, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, and submitted 2-3
Mhm.
projects
Correct.
total?
each year. Yeah, 2 to 3. And so we need your direction because these are due at the end of.
So let's go to your initial slide that show all of the projects together. Matt, do you have that?
So now you're asking a lot. Hang on. I gotta go find the report. I knew I should have pulled that up before I came in. Talk among yourselves for a minute.
Well, I mean, as far as the tap, it's Highland or Danish, I like the option of getting money out on Danish and doing some design. That's been something that's been left over from county days. They were gonna originally do that end, but then when we incorporated, the residents out there said, no, we're not interested in having that. But that's also been a long time. But that road has those narrow areas,
Sucker has.
do need to be looked at. I think you could do that with the
Well, this is, but he wants the original.
multi-use path. I don't like, I don't really like the idea of the Cheryl so much. It'd be nice to have the width to put them on a raised bike path that keeps them out of the way, because some of those geometries are really tight.
Because it's not the width of the road. The roadways that are narrow, where you use various facilities to slow the cars down. You can ride through the most affluent areas and they have that. We shouldn't in our mind think that more asphalt and width makes bicyclists safer. It's slowing the cars down that makes cyclists safer. So I hope that we can perhaps ask the PTOS committee or others within our community, because I know that that's our go-to to add more asphalt.
Well, separating them is probably the safest,
But
correct?
you lose the character of Danish Drive, and the people on Danish want 25 miles an hour. And when cars slow down to 18 miles an hour in a 60-yard, then let them slow down, say 15 miles an hour around the clock. We don't have to drive everywhere we go as fast as we can. It's a mentality that is ruining the character and the quality of our lives,
I,
in my opinion. obviously.
that.
But it's-
you
it is-
made that
But it
opinion
is
very, very clear.
statistically supported, and I think when we study
Okay.
safe systems for all, I will have a little vindication here, because once you look at what is coming out of the US Department of Transportation, they're making it crystal clear that it is slowing the speeds down that save lives.
And so you need to establish that that is the issue, but here, having this well designed, having the separation, it accomplishes those facts. It's not just, it's not as simple as speed is evil and asphalt is evil.
Where
It's
cars are
not-
moving fast.
It's
that-
not
that
as
they-
simple as speed
Cyclists
is
need to
evil.
be
can always-
protected. Where cars are moving at 25 miles an hour or 18 miles an hour, that is a horse of a different color. So we shouldn't, deflate this. We should deal with Danish Road and its special qualities and not treat it like Wasatch Boulevard or Fort Union. It is
I
very
don't think
different.
anybody has said we were gonna treat it that way, and I don't think this proposal treats it that way at all. So again, if I was choosing between these two, I would choose Danish over the Highland project.
Councilor
And
Newell, any thoughts?
No, I just. Yeah, I like the Danish project because I think it's something that's been a long time as well. But making sure we're doing the right things in the project is my concern.
a lot of the design elements that really need to happen up on Wasatch, as far as the calming and the perception of widths and speeds,
So if we
on a
submit
smaller
for
scale can,
2 to 3, why would we not just submit for both anyway? Matt?
They're gonna ask priority, so I'd like to know
Okay,
what you have as a
he can put it on
priority.
his list.
so we could ask, okay,
I mean, this is a little selfish as well, and it's probably not a good reason. But keeping it down to a couple of them to apply for would really help my staff and myself with our ulcers. And I mean, I know it may not be the best reason in the world, but this is quite a bit of work that we have to put through. The letters of intent, a little more straightforward, but
We
when
bear
we
them
start
your
getting-
ulcers, Matt.
but-
You don't
well,
have to say
I
anything
like
more.
the letters of intent, but
We
when
get
we
it.
get down to the application, that really gets pretty intense. In
And I think
in
that
December.
focus is critical.
Yeah.
I think the focus has to be,
so
Yeah.
my question is of how many projects are we considering to get to 2? Do you have that list?
Or,
Well, there's the intersection at Danish and Creek,
Oh, I'm
that's
sorry,
one,
yeah.
and then there's Danish, that's 2. Then there's the road along Highland, the frontage road along Highland. So those are 3, and then
And
the
the Fort
Fort
Union
Union cycle track
So
over in the
those
north, so
4.
there's
well,
4.
but the Fort Union cycle track is an STP,
That's an
so is
STP.
the Creek Danish. So those can it's kind of, which of those 2 do you want to have as number 1, which you want to have as number 2? And then of the Danish and Highland, which do you want number 1 and which do you want number 2? That's the way I see it, and then Matt can.
Yeah,
do his-
it's,
do his
I
thing,
mean,
and he'll say, well,
we
just
we
don't
have
like
2
that one.
taps, we have 2 taps and 2 STPs. And we can,
So we
if
can,
we want to do 4, and like I said, we will make it happen. We'll make the applications happen. So if you want to just tell me your priority, then I can do it in that direction as well.
more than likely, the 2 taps, the 2 STPs, we're gonna get 1 of the 4.
We'll get 1 of the 4.
Okay.
My
So,
guess.
so do we need to prioritize between
If
tap
you
and
wanna,
STP?
if you wanna, yeah, STP, you got 2 options there, which one's your priority, and then you have the tap. 2 options there, which one's the number 1 and number 2?
So STP is the Creek Danish stretch
Correct.
or the cycle track on Fort Union, is that
Correct.
right? And then the 2 taps are the frontage road along
Highland, and
Highland
then
and the
the,
intersection
Danish.
of Danish, the raised
No,
intersection.
no.
You switch the intersection and the Danish one.
the STP is Danish intersection, Danish and Creek,
Because it's an intersection, it can go under STP.
and the cycle track on Fort Union. The tap is the Highland Trail from 215 to Fort Union. And Danish Road sidewalks.
Okay, so I'm okay prioritizing Danish over Highland on the tap. It sounds like you are as well. I know Councilmember Burl is, and then you okay with that, Councilmember Newell and Holton?
So I'm sorry, so then the two STPs are, say that one,
Intersection.
Cycle track and the
Or
intersection.
cycle
of
track.
Danish.
Okay,
Councilmember Holton, do you have an idea of that, or?
That's fine.
Is that fine? Okay. And then for tap,
No, that,
I mean, for STP, we'll need to prioritize.
I think the cycle track probably easier to get.
I would say I'd be more in favor of the cycle track myself.
well, I know Hugh Van Wagenen out at WFRC, I was talking to him this week, and he was very impressed with your cycle track project. He thought that would likely score well.
Oh, and that's,
Your.
So let's prioritize that one as well. But then. we
Okay,
need to
that's
spend-
fine. One, two, we'll make it happen.
Okay.
We'll get the applications put in.
Okay.
Just when you see Adam, just give him a hug. He's gonna be here.
it looks like he's receptive to getting the hug.
He will definitely hug.
Well,
He'll
we
take care of
don't
it.
need, we don't need to submit the twos, right? We just submit one STP and one tap.
If that is what you'd like.
I think we're all in favor of that anyway, right?
Well, strategically, what do you recommend? Is it better to do that?
Yeah,
You could have a
You're only-
letter in
you're
your
only gonna
back
get-
pocket.
yeah, we're only gonna get one.
You're only gonna
so-
get one,
Mhm.
so
We'll do an STP and we'll do a TAF if that's what you'd like.
But the good news on this, Councilman Holton, is that there's some other grant opportunities coming up within the next 12 months, hopefully
Yes, that's
more
correct.
related to safe mobility for all users.
Yeah, it
So,
would be more related to those smaller projects that we're discussing.
Like the intersection?
So the intersection,
Yeah.
jet blocks,
Yeah,
raised,
yeah.
any of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I make one, Mayor? I know we're under time.
No,
I
we're
need
good.
clarification. On Danish, we're just focusing on the sidewalk, completing the sidewalk on the west side of Danish in all the gaps. Is that correct?
Would it be, how hard will it give Adam a heart attack to ask him to look at, because this would really appease those residents who are really concerned about the speeds of people approaching the intersection of Danish and Creek. If we could have a couple of islands, maybe especially where cars are approaching that intersection on Danish, to not only slow cars down, they know they're coming into a residential area as they come out of the intersection or as they approach it. Because, I mean, a few islands or something to, again, give
Well, it
motorists
depends on the
pause.
size of the road.
Well,
I mean,
the road is wider as it comes into that northerly section before it hits the intersection.
Well, this one is actually gonna be a little more technical than just the sidewalk. This is gonna require sections of road. They will have to be widened on the west side to match. There's gonna be retaining walls. There's gonna be quite a few things that are happening on this.
And my
It's
suggestion
not.
would be to go for the whole plan. If you have to tap it down afterwards, because they say we just don't have $1.5 million, but you can have 750. Then you can work on. Because it's but what you're talking about is overall design. And to get some of those things accomplished, you're gonna need to do more than just insert the sidewalk. And you'll need funding for it. When you get to actually design, then that's where you can start saying.
Thanks.
Yeah.
One of those sidewalks gets really close
Okay.
to a couple.
Cycle track and the other, okay.
So, thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, council. Item 5 is a review of calendars and upcoming events. On September 26th, we have a ribbon cutting at 5 o'clock for the Ferguson Park at 7725 South Prospector Drive. We're all looking forward.
12-foot bronze, if you was gonna be there.
Gold.
Well,
Yeah, there you go.
you want something that's shiny forever.
The October 27th, crazy, we're already getting close to that, from 5 to 7, the Monster Mash at the Cottonwood Heights Recreation Center. And then
On the dress up,
do I
Yes.
dress up as you?
werewolf. I keep making it.
Honestly, that particular event, you've got to be really careful on being anything that's even slightly scary,
Yeah.
because there's small children and
Okay.
and some of them really don't like that.
Well, then I should go.
October 31st is our, from 3 to 4:30 is our trunk or treat at the Conwood Heights City Hall parking lot.
Cool.
So we do not have anything to discuss in a closed meeting, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the work session and enter into the city's Board of Canvassers
not till
meetings
6.
scheduled to
Okay.
begin at 6:30.
I'll move that we adjourn the work session and reconvene the Board of Canvassers at 6:30. In the other
Okay.
room.
Second.